The old man waited until my father's coffin was being lowered into the ground before he told me I had buried the wrong man as my father. He stood 3 rows behind the family during the service. I had never seen him before. Gray suit, silver hair, a cane he barely used. He didn't cry when everyone else did. He watched my mother. That should have warned me. After the minister finished, people began placing roses on the coffin. The old man approached me. "Rebecca?" "Yes?" He looked toward the grave. Then he said quietly, "Thomas wasn't your father." For a second, I thought grief had made me misunderstand him. "What did you say?" My mother heard. The rose slipped from her fingers. "Arthur," she whispered, so she knew him. The old man reached into his coat and put a small brass key in my hand. "Ask your mother what happened in 1974. My mother grabbed my wrist. "Give that back." Arthur looked directly at her. "You've had 52 years, Margaret." Then he turned to me. "The man you buried loved you. I'm not questioning that." He glanced at my father's coffin. "But your real father died believing you hated him." My mother slapped him, right there beside my father's open grave. And that was the moment I realized the funeral wasn't ending my family's story. It was opening the part they had spent half a century hiding. My name is Rebecca Hale. I was 52 when my father, Thomas Hale, died from complications after a stroke. Until that funeral, there had never been a single serious doubt in my mind that Thomas was my father. He taught me to drive in an empty church parking lot. He built a dollhouse when I was 8 and rebuilt my kitchen when I was 46. He called every Sunday, even when we had nothing to say. Thomas wasn't an emotional man. That was his weakness. He could repair a leaking roof in the rain, but would rather climb onto that roof than tell someone he was afraid. When my first marriage ended, he drove 4 hours to my house, changed 3 broken cabinet hinges, filled my refrigerator, hugged me once, and left. That was how he loved. Through actions that prevented conversations. My mother, Margaret, was different. She talked constantly, but only about things she could control. She was organized, proud, and fiercely protective of the family's reputation. That was her weakness. If pain happened privately, Mom could survive it. If the neighbors knew, she considered it a second disaster. My weakness was certainty. I hated unanswered questions. I could forgive an ugly truth faster than a suspicious silence. So when a stranger told me Thomas wasn't my father and my mother reacted like she'd seen a ghost, there was no version of the next day where I simply went home and forgot it. I waited until the last guest left the funeral reception. Then I placed the brass key on my mother's kitchen table. "Who is Arthur?" She continued wrapping leftover sandwiches. "An old man who should know better. You knew his name before he introduced himself." She pressed plastic wrap over a plate. "Rebecca, your father died yesterday, and apparently he wasn't my father." She stopped. For several seconds, only the refrigerator hummed. Then she said, "Thomas was your father in every way that matters." It was the kind of sentence people use when they know the literal answer is going to hurt. "Was he my biological father?" Mom stared at the table. "No, one word." 52 years gone. I sat down. "Who was?" Her eyes moved toward the brass key. "A man named Michael Grant. The old man at the funeral was Arthur Grant, Michael's father." And suddenly I knew exactly what my first suspicion was. "Did you cheat on Dad?" Mom's head snapped up. "No." But she answered too quickly. And for the next 24 hours, I believed my mother had betrayed the man I had just buried. That was only the first thing I got wrong. The key opened a storage locker at the old train station downtown. Arthur had written the locker number on a card taped to the key. My mother begged me not to go. That guaranteed I would. Inside was a metal box, nothing more. I carried it to my car and opened it in the passenger seat. The first thing I saw was a photograph. My mother was maybe 20. She was sitting on the hood of a Mustang beside a young man I had never seen. Michael Grant. I knew immediately, not because anyone had told me what he looked like, because I had his eyes, same heavy lids, same crooked left eyebrow, same dimple that appeared only on one side when he smiled. His arm was around my mother. On the back she had written, "Michael plus Margaret. Summer 1972. Forever if we're lucky." My stomach turned. Thomas and my mother had always celebrated their anniversary in September 1973. I was born in June 1974. The dates seemed obvious. Michael and Mom in 1972. Mom married Thomas in 1973. Me born 9 months later. An affair. Then I found their marriage certificate. Not Thomas and Margaret. Michael Grant and Margaret Ellis. April 14th, 1973. My mother had been married before Thomas. That was the second truth she had removed from our family history. There were letters beneath it. Michael's handwriting was messy and impatient. Most were affectionate. Some were angry. The final one was dated March 1974, 3 months before my birth. Margaret, I know you're scared. I'm scared too. But this is my child. You don't get to decide I'm dangerous because I made mistakes. I'll come home when I can come home clean. Please don't let Thomas replace me before I've even had the chance to be her father. I read that sentence 4 times. Thomas had known Michael, maybe better than I realized. When I confronted Mom, she stopped denying. Michael had been her first husband. They married young, too young, she said. Michael was charming, impulsive, generous, and incapable of believing consequences applied to him. His weakness was escape. When life became uncomfortable, Michael drank, gambled, disappeared, or promised tomorrow would be different. By the time Mom became pregnant, he owed thousands of dollars and had lost 2 jobs. Then he vanished. Dad stole you from him? I asked. Mom's face hardened. Thomas stole nothing. Michael's letter says, Michael's letters always made Michael the victim. That sounded possible. And for the first time, the dead biological father I had never known became less romantic. But one question remained. If Michael disappeared before I was born, how did Thomas enter the story? Mom folded her hands. Thomas was his best friend. And that answer made everything worse. Thomas and Michael had grown up together. Same high school, same baseball team, same first factory job. Arthur Grant had treated Thomas almost like a second son because Thomas's own father died when he was 14. When Michael began drinking heavily, Thomas covered shifts for him. When Michael gambled away rent money, Thomas loaned him cash. When Mom called Thomas at 2 in the morning because Michael hadn't come home, Thomas searched the bars. That was Thomas's weakness long before I was born. He rescued people until rescuing them became part of his identity. Michael disappeared in January 1974. Mom was 4 months pregnant. Thomas started bringing groceries, then driving her to appointments, then fixing things around the apartment. I fell in love with him, Mom said. When? She looked ashamed. Before Michael came back. My chest tightened. He came back? Yes. When? 6 days after you were born. That was the detail everyone had avoided. Michael walked into the hospital carrying flowers and asking to see his wife and daughter. By then, he had been sober almost 5 months. He had a job in another state. He wanted Mom to come with him. She refused. I didn't trust him anymore. Did Dad? Thomas wanted me to give him a chance. That surprised me. The story I had built inside my head needed Thomas to be the thief. Instead, according to Mom, Thomas stepped aside. For 6 months, Michael tried. He visited. He bought diapers. He held me. Then one night, he disappeared again. This time with money stolen from the company where he worked. Arthur paid the debt to prevent charges. Michael left Virginia. A year later, Mom divorced him. Thomas married her when I was 3. He adopted me legally when I was 4. So why didn't you tell me? Mom's answer came immediately. Because you were happy. No. Why didn't you tell me when I was 18? You adored Thomas. At 25? You were getting married. At 35? You had children. I laughed bitterly. There was always a reason. She started crying. Yes, that was the first honest answer she gave me. Then I remembered Arthur's words. Your real father died, believing you hated him. Michael came back again. Mom looked away. That was enough. When? She whispered, when you were 11. And that was when my childhood began changing shape. I remembered him. Not his name. His face. A man had once waited near the elementary school parking lot when I was 11. I had forgotten him because nothing dramatic happened. He asked whether I was Rebecca Hale. I said yes. He smiled strangely and said, you look taller than I imagined. Then Thomas appeared. My father took one look at him and sent me back inside. That evening, Mom and Dad argued behind their bedroom door. The next morning, nobody mentioned it. The stranger had been Michael, my biological father. He was 34, sober again, married again, working construction. He wanted to know me. What did you tell him? I asked. Mom wiped her eyes. No, you wouldn't even let him speak to me? He had abandoned you twice. I was a baby. That doesn't make it better. Arthur filled in the rest when I finally called him. His weakness was bitterness. He had spent decades blaming Thomas and Margaret for Michael's failures because accepting that his son had repeatedly hurt people was harder. Arthur told me Michael visited Virginia 6 times between my 11th and 18th birthdays. Thomas met him every time. My mother refused. That fact made Thomas look different again. Did Dad stop him from seeing me? Arthur's jaw tightened. At first I thought so. At first? Michael blamed Thomas. For what? Everything. That sounded like Mom's version. Then Arthur gave me an address. A woman named Denise Grant lived 40 miles away, Michael's widow. I drove there the next afternoon. Denise was 70. She had sharp eyes and the exhausted patience of someone who had spent a lifetime cleaning up after charismatic men. Her weakness was loyalty. Even after Michael's death, she defended him beyond what the facts deserved. He loved you, she told me. He abandoned me. Yes, both could apparently be true. Michael married Denise when I was 9. They had a son named Lucas, my half-brother, another person nobody had told me existed. Then Denise showed me a folder. Inside were canceled checks from Thomas. My father had been sending money to Michael's family for more than 20 years. At first I thought I understood. Guilt. Then I saw the amount of one check. $50,000, dated 3 weeks before Michael died. Suddenly I had a different suspicion. What happened to Michael? Denise didn't answer immediately. Car accident. When? 1998. I felt cold. And Dad gave him $50,000 3 weeks before he died? Yes. Why? Denise looked toward the window. You need to ask Arthur what Thomas paid Michael to do. By then I distrusted everyone. My mother, Arthur, Denise, even Thomas, who had been dead less than a week and could no longer defend himself. Arthur admitted the $50,000 existed, but he called it blood money. That phrase lodged in my mind. Michael had returned again in 1998. I was 24 and planning my wedding. He had decided he was finished waiting for permission. He wanted to contact me. Thomas met him at a motel outside Richmond. 2 days later, Thomas withdrew $50,000 from an investment account. 3 weeks later, Michael drove his truck off a mountain road in West Virginia. No other vehicle, no witnesses. For several hours, I let myself imagine something terrible. Thomas bribing Michael, threatening him, maybe even causing the accident. Grief makes suspicion feel like evidence when someone can no longer answer. I returned to my mother. Did Thomas pay Michael to disappear? She went pale. Who told you? So he did. No. Then why $50,000? Mom sat down. Because Michael was dying. That stopped me. Michael had been diagnosed with an aggressive lymphoma. His insurance coverage was poor. He needed treatment. Thomas gave him the money, not to disappear, to stay alive long enough to meet me. The car accident happened while Michael was driving home from chemotherapy. The police believed he fell asleep. I covered my mouth. So Dad was helping him? Yes. Then why didn't I meet him? Mom didn't answer. That silence had become unbearable. Why? Because I said no. There it was. Thomas had spent years pushing Mom to tell me. She refused. She believed Michael had forfeited the right to enter my life. Thomas believed the decision should eventually become mine. They fought about it for years. Then, in 1998, Thomas finally told Margaret he would bring Michael to my wedding rehearsal and let him speak to me. Mom threatened to leave. Not because she still loved Michael, because she was terrified. If you met him, she whispered, I thought you would ask why I kept him away. I'm asking now. I know, and, she started crying, because part of me wanted him punished. That was the truth beneath all her explanations. Michael had humiliated her, abandoned her pregnant, returned when convenient, disappeared again. Mom didn't simply protect me. She punished him by taking away the one thing he eventually wanted most, me. And Thomas allowed it because losing his marriage frightened him more than betraying the truth. Nobody in that room was innocent anymore. But the strongest betrayal was still waiting in Thomas's safe. The brass key Arthur gave me had opened the storage locker. But there had been another key taped beneath the metal box, a smaller one. Thomas's attorney recognized it. It belonged to a safe deposit box. Inside were documents, photographs, Michael's final letter, and a digital recorder. Thomas had recorded a message 6 months before his stroke. I listened alone in my car. Rebecca, if you're hearing this, I waited too long. His voice nearly broke me. Thomas admitted everything. The adoption, Michael's visits, the arguments with Mom, the money. Then he said something I didn't expect. I let you believe I was your biological father because I wanted to be enough. I closed my eyes. There was his weakness, not only protection, fear. Thomas had loved me so completely that the possibility of sharing the word father terrified him. I told myself the truth would hurt you. Sometimes that was true, but sometimes I was protecting myself. He paused. Michael made terrible choices. Your mother made choices out of anger. Arthur made choices out of pride. I made mine out of fear. Then Thomas mentioned Lucas, my half-brother. I helped him because Michael asked me to. After Michael died, Thomas secretly paid part of Lucas's college tuition. He attended Lucas's graduation. He sent Christmas cards. He never told me. Another secret. I should have been furious. Instead, I cried. Thomas had tried to care for both children of the man who once called him his best friend, not because he was perfect, because he never stopped feeling responsible for the pieces Michael left behind. Then Thomas said, "There is one thing nobody else knows." I stopped breathing. "Michael did meet you." I stared at the recorder. "No, I would have remembered," Thomas continued, "2 weeks before your wedding." And suddenly I remembered a rainy afternoon in 1998. I had stopped at a diner after work. An older man sat beside me at the counter. He was thin, wearing a baseball cap. His hands trembled. He asked if I was getting married because he noticed my engagement ring. We talked maybe 15 minutes, nothing important, or so I thought. He asked what my father was like. I smiled and said, "The best man I know." The stranger looked down at his coffee. Then he asked, "You ever wish you had a different one?" I laughed. "No." His eyes filled. I assumed he was emotional because he was sick. Before leaving, he paid for my coffee. He said, "Your dad's a lucky man." That stranger was Michael. Thomas had arranged it, not as a formal reunion. Michael had lost weight from treatment and didn't think I would recognize any resemblance. He wanted to see me once. Thomas sat in his truck across the street. Michael had planned to tell me. Then I called Thomas the best man I know. And Michael changed his mind. His final letter explained why. "Rebecca, I spent years saying Thomas stole my place. The truth is I kept walking away from it. He stayed. I wanted you to know my name because I was dying and afraid nobody would remember me. But that isn't the same as having earned the right to call myself your father. I watched you talk about Thomas. There was no empty place for me to reclaim. There was only a life I should have been grateful someone else protected after I failed to. I had to stop reading." For 52 years, everyone had argued about who had the right to tell me the truth. Nobody had considered how strange the truth actually was. Michael was my biological father. Thomas was my legal father, but biology and paperwork were the least complicated parts. Michael had loved me and abandoned me. Thomas had loved me and lied to me. Mom had protected me and punished Michael through me. Arthur loved his son so much that he spent decades blaming everyone except him. Every person had carried both love and selfishness in the same hands. Then I reached the final page of Michael's letter. There was one sentence. "If Rebecca ever learns about me, please tell her Lucas exists. She shouldn't lose another sibling because we were all too afraid to open our mouths." I met Lucas 2 weeks later. He was 43, mechanic, divorced, father of 2 daughters. He walked into the restaurant carrying Thomas's old wristwatch. I stared at it. That was Dad's. Lucas nodded. He gave it to me at my college graduation. There was no jealousy in his voice, only embarrassment. "I didn't know who he was to you until later." We talked for 4 hours. Lucas's weakness was resentment. He had grown up angry that Michael talked about a daughter named Rebecca more often than he talked about the son sitting at his own dinner table. I had grown up never knowing Michael's name. We had both been wounded by the same man from opposite directions. Before leaving, Lucas said, "Arthur wants you to hate Thomas." I know. He spent 30 years believing if Thomas hadn't stepped in, Dad would have become a better man. "What do you believe?" Lucas looked down. "I think Dad became whatever he chose to become." That sentence stayed with me. A month after the funeral, I returned to Thomas's grave. Arthur was there. I suspected he knew I would come. "Well?" he asked. "You were right." His expression softened. "He wasn't your father." I looked at the headstone. Thomas Edward Hale, beloved husband, father, grandfather. Then I looked at Arthur. "No, that's the part you were wrong about." He frowned. "Michael was my biological father." Arthur's eyes filled, but Thomas was my dad. Arthur looked away. For once he had no argument ready. I placed Michael's final letter in his hands. "Your son knew the difference before he died." Arthur read silently. His shoulders began shaking. He had spent decades trying to restore Michael to a position Michael himself had finally admitted he had not earned. I sat beside him. After a while, Arthur whispered, I should have come sooner. Yes, I was angry. I know. I thought Thomas took my son's family. I looked at my father's grave. Maybe Thomas took something too. Arthur turned toward me. He took away my right to know. That mattered. Loving Thomas did not require pretending his lie was harmless. I could honor the father he had been and still be angry at the truth he withheld. Those things could exist together. Before leaving, I added one thing beneath the flowers, a photograph, Thomas holding me at my high school graduation. On the back I had written, "Not my biological father, still my father," because after 52 years I finally understood the difference. I used to believe family truth was simple. Someone was either your father or he wasn't. Someone either loved you or betrayed you. Someone either protected you or lied to you. But people are rarely that clean. Michael gave me life and repeatedly ran from responsibility. My mother raised me with fierce love, but part of the secret she kept was punishment disguised as protection. Arthur loved his son, but his love made him excuse choices that hurt everyone around him. Thomas stayed. Every birthday, every illness, every broken marriage, every ordinary Sunday. And still, Thomas lied to me because he was afraid the truth might make him less important. That lie mattered. So did everything else he did. The old man at the funeral thought one biological fact could erase 52 years. It couldn't. But 52 years of love couldn't erase the fact that I deserved the truth either. Maybe adulthood is learning that forgiveness doesn't require choosing one version of a person. Thomas could be the father who never left me, and the man who should have told me who Michael was. Michael could be the man who abandoned me, and the dying stranger who chose not to destroy the father I loved. My mother could love me and still have used me to punish someone who hurt her. None of those truths cancel the others. We do ourselves a disservice when we turn complicated people into heroes or villains just because one label is easier to carry. Michael gave me his eyes. Thomas taught me how to use them to look at the world. And in the end, both facts belong to me. If you were Rebecca, who would you find hardest to forgive? Thomas for hiding the truth because he was afraid of losing his place as her father. Margaret for keeping Michael away, partly out of anger. Michael for abandoning his daughter and returning only after years had passed. Or Arthur for waiting until a funeral to reveal everything. And most importantly, do you think being a biological father gives someone a permanent right to that title, or does the person who stays earn it? Write what you think in the comments. What you think in the comments. What you think in the comments.